former employees of the hospital trust or their representatives. The trust operated the sweepstakes until it was closed down in 1987. There was a broad welcome for the measure, which was introduced by the Taoiseach, as Michael O'Sullivan now reports.
The Taoiseach said that about 147 former employees of the hospital's trust will benefit from this legislation. She said the majority were single women living in poor conditions who had been dependent on state pensions. She outlined the background to the legislation and described how it would work.
I would like to say that this bill represents the final chapter in the ongoing saga concerning the treatment of a small group of sweepstake workers who were made redundant in 1987. The perception is widespread that these workers were badly dealt with both by their former employer and the state. The present bill vindicates the campaign of those former employees for a generous gesture by government. It is hoped that these former employees will take some satisfaction from this ex gratia payment. And can I say in particular, I want to salute the efforts of the representative of the sweepstake workers, John Slevin. I think if it wasn't for his determination, for the fact that he was so resolute, such a good campaigner for the former workers, I doubt we would have legislation of this kind before us today. And those former workers in particular owe him a great deal of gratitude. I am delighted to be in a position to bring this bill before the House and to ensure that a group of very vulnerable people who were done a grave injustice, in my view, can now get some satisfaction from what's happening, and I commend this bill to the House.
In effect, the bill will allow the former employees or their personal representatives to receive a once-off ex gratia payment of £20,000. Nora Owen of Fine Gael welcomed the legislation.
There's an old saying, it's better late than never, and if ever that applied to something, it applies to this legislation today, Minister. And it applies to this piece of legislation because eventually, under this legislation, former workers of hospital sweepstake will be paid an ex gratia payment of £20,000, and I understand there's about 147 or so people who will benefit. These staff who worked in the sweepstakes, I have to say, were mostly women, and very many of them were widows. My own mother was a widow for almost all of her married life, and many of her friends, it was the only work they could find was to work in the sweepstake, and they had to work very hard for a very low wage, and many of them, when the sweepstakes closed down, suffered. And I'm very, very glad today that we are here today passing this legislation in order to pay people an ex gratia payment. It doesn't fully make up for what they've suffered. There's no doubt about that at all. But it is very heartening and heartwarming to know that there are people who have fought long and hard, 14 years, long and hard, quietly, and very often without much recognition. They now see that they're going to get their just worth. It's heartwarming, I have to say, to read of the delight of people, and particularly heartwarming to read of the delight, if I'm sure she won't mind if I mention her by name, of one of the recipients, Maureen MacDonald, who was written up in a very nice piece in the Evening Herald recently. And it's interesting to note that she says one of the things she wants to do is to go to the Galway races. Well, I think that's rather apt, as you're a Galway woman yourself, Minister, that she wants to go to the Galway races. And I hope she has a great day. I don't know whether she's here today listening to it. I hope she has plenty of victory. And do you know something? She might even be asked into the Fianna Fáil tent. Now, wouldn't that be something? Because it might be also... Yeah, she wouldn't when she pays in, I hope she... But, I mean, because the Fianna Fáil tent may be an endangered species as well as the Fianna Fáil PD government, it might be something she'd like to do. So I don't know, I'm not in a position to extend such an invitation, but I'm sure the Minister, with her contacts in the Fianna Fáil part of the government, might be able to ensure that she got at least a glass of bubbly in the tent.
Labour's Pat Rabbitte also welcomed the legislation.
It is an inglorious chapter in Irish employment history. Deputy Owen has traced the background over the years, and it is fair to say that the people here concerned were treated shabbily by their employers and neglected, as Deputy Owen has also said, by successive governments since then. Although I sponsored the cause of these workers during the present Dail, I'm ashamed to say that I didn't really know about it prior to that. And it is indeed an exceptional tribute to Mr. John Slevin, who, as I understand it, was a one-man band, if you like, in advocating the cause of these workers, that it has resulted in this legislation this evening.
Minister of State with special responsibility for housing, Bobby Malloy,